Screen time is such a hot topic in parenting, and it can feel really polarizing, especially if we listen to the opinions of many, particularly on certain social media platforms. What I want to do is talk about screen time with some research-based facts about its effects at bedtime in order to allow you as a parent to make a really informed and conscientious decision about screen time and the use of it in the bedtime hour. Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm so happy you found your way to my channel. As a certified pediatric sleep consultant, I have made it my life's mission to help families get the sleep that they need. And with two little girls, the ages of 5 and 8, in my own home, I see the effects of screen time all of the time, both positive and negative. So while I'm going to talk about the research, I also want to give you real life and sustainable practices that are going to feel good with your family in those very stressful last few hours of your daytime. Let's get right into it. What does screen time do? Physically, when you are looking at a screen, whether that's a TV, an iPad, a Kindle, a phone, it emits blue light. And when our eyes perceive blue light, it signals to our brain to produce more cortisol and adrenaline, which is our awake hormone. What science tells us is that for children between the ages of 0 and 7 years old, their bedtime should be sometime between 6 and 8 p.m. I know that's 6 p.m. sounds a little crazy to people because many people aren't even home from work at that hour. But just talking about the science of it, right? Now remember, we're going to talk about the facts, and then I'm going to talk about what's going to make it sustainable for your family. That's more of a reality. When science tells us that bedtime between 6 and 8 is the most effective bedtime, they're talking about what's happening biologically and internally in our little ones' systems in those hours. Between 6 and 8, our bodies are producing more melatonin and adenosine, which are our sleepy hormones. That means that our body is sending hormone signals to our brain that it is time to shut down, wind down, and go to sleep. So if we incorporate screen time use between those hours, between 6 and 8 p.m., it's sending very conflicting signals to our body. Our eyes are saying it's time to be awake, and our system, our circadian rhythms, are saying it's time to be asleep. For children who are really well rested, who have a really established routine, who fall asleep easily and independently, who sleep through the night, who aren't struggling with early morning wakings, this is fine. It's okay to incorporate a little bit of screen time, in my opinion, because it isn't affecting their body's biology. However, I really would encourage families to try and time the end of screen time to be about 1 hour prior to your optimal fall asleep time. If we think about this on a reality basis, and I'm thinking about even my own family and our own schedule. My kids have lots of after school activities, and when they get home from their after school activities, it's somewhere around 5 or 5:30. Then we make dinner. During the dinner time, they need something to fill in the space, honestly, so that I can cook dinner and we can keep the ball rolling. You know what I'm talking about. For my older kids, that requires homework time. So I have now seen later on in life that there are substitutes for screen time. But if I rewind the clock to before the time when they had homework, that actually meant that I put them in front of a screen. I had to. It was the best way for them to honestly just sit and relax their body and give me 30 minutes to be able to prep the meal and get dinner on the table so that we could be eating by 6 o'clock. At that point, I knew that I had at least an hour, if not more, before they were going to bed, so their bodies could start to balance and reset any hormone imbalance that they had accrued from watching the screen time. Listen, I am not a martyr. I am certainly far from the perfect parent. There have been countless that I could not remember days that they have sat on more than enough screen time, more than an hour of screen time right up to the point of bedtime. But I will tell you a little anecdote from when my oldest was about 2 years old. I had been going through a lot of sleep struggles with her. We were struggling at bedtime. She was in a big kid bed. She needed me to fall asleep, had all of a sudden gone from this really great independent sleeper to waking up all of the time, and I was pregnant. So I was exhausted. I had went to see a doctor And the doctor actually said to me, well, what do you do with your routine? And I said, we take a bath, and then we come downstairs and we have a snack and we watch some TV, and then we go read a book and go to bed. And she said, I think you need to flip the order of that. I'm not saying to not incorporate TV, but I think you incorporating the TV so close to bedtime is affecting her circadian rhythms in some way, and just switching the order will be helpful. And I kid you not, it was life-changing for us. In addition to other elements, such as being better with my routine and really reestablishing her independent sleep skills. But I was encouraged to do so because I moved screen time 30 minutes sooner. That's all it took. I was still able to sit and veg for a little bit and get stuff done. She was still able to watch Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and we found that it really positively affected her ability to fall asleep independently and efficiently. If your children are really struggling to go to sleep and they're not falling asleep independently, they're waking up multiple times a night, or they're waking up first thing in the morning, that's really, really early before your desired wake time, I also want you to consider the placement of the screen time. So it's not something you need to eliminate completely, but just as I had spoke about with my oldest daughter, really the timing of it could be having even more of an impact on that increase in cortisol and adrenaline. So when our children aren't sleeping well, they have an accrual of a sleep debt. So their hormones are naturally out of balance because they're not getting a good enough night's sleep. When we introduce screen time, it is going to throw the balance off that much more, making it much harder to fall asleep. And when it's harder to fall asleep, it's harder to stay asleep throughout the night. So I hope I say this enough, and I hope you feel supported and empowered to make a decision that isn't going to be so black and white as to say, eliminate screen time, don't ever put it in your house. But I really want to encourage you to move the position of it and maybe even shorten the length of it so that it isn't as effective to their awake hormones. The last piece of advice in terms of screen time and how it affects your child's bedtime is regarding the type of screen time. So not all screen time is created equal. And I'm sure you've all heard, I've heard too, from our grandparents who are very well-intentioned, well-meaning, saying, well, you guys watch TV all the time. You watched hours a day. There was never a limit, and you turned out fine. And what new research is telling us is that's not synonymous to the screen time we have available to our children now. Shows such as Cocomelon and the like, right? So I'm thinking of cartoons that have scenes that change very, very fast. So there's never anything that you focus on for more than 2 or 3 seconds at a time. If you want to know what I'm talking about, pause this, open up another tab, YouTube Cocomelon, and understand the fast-paced nature of TV shows such as Cocomelon. The idea is when our little ones are receiving that information and there's constantly new things on the screen and new music and so much stimulation, this can also increase their cortisol and adrenaline even more, in addition to obviously having the blue light that's doing this to their body as well. TV shows back in the day, I'm thinking like back in the day for me would be like the 90s. Maybe for you it's the early 2000s or maybe even the 80s. The idea for trying those TV shows was to get attention, we needed to have prolonged focus. So if you pay attention to a cartoon, for old school cartoon Looney Tunes, you would see that the background of Looney Tunes was just one scene. They never cut scenes. They just followed the cartoon character across that one background or one scene. The prolonged focus was assumed to grab our attention for a longer period of time. Now, if you go to modern TV shows, again, such as Cocomelon, you're going to see that they're spamming you with new images all the time. This is so similar to the way that we as adults consume social media. I'm as guilty as the next person. We have like a 2 or 3 second attention rate as we're scrolling, and if it doesn't grasp our attention in 2 seconds, we're on to the next thing. This can be so addicting to our brains that are fully developed as grown-ups. When we're talking about little kids whose brains are not fully developed, this can actually cause some long-term damaging effects. Let's talk about some alternative TV shows that are really great for your child to watch that reduce overstimulation and reduce that cortisol and adrenaline response specifically at bedtime. Some modern ones are Bluey. That is a great show that if you haven't gotten your child into, I highly suggest, and it's fun to watch with them as a parent. What I also love about Bluey is that the episodes are short. So we're not investing 20 or 30 minutes of screen time per episode. It can be easier to transition them off of a screen the shorter amount of time they are on it. And it's funny. It's just funny to watch because they speak to the parents as well. Honestly, any type of programming that is on PBS Kids are really great non-stimulating TV shows as well. So I'm thinking old school stuff like Curious George, new school stuff such as Eleanor Wonders Why. These are all TV shows that are going to reduce stimulation. They're not going to have that spammy new screen and new plot every 5 seconds. And it'll allow your little one to engage in something educational and they can learn, but it also is going to reduce the amount of time that they are in front of a screen. The last thing that many families come to me very concerned about is transitioning off of screens. So because of the really addictive nature of screens for our little ones and their underdeveloped brain, it sometimes can be really hard to end screen time and move on to the next step. This can be a trigger for them. They know that, okay, now that screen time's over, we're moving to dinner, and then that means bedtime, and then that means I have to go to sleep, right? And if they're older, it's not really the best time of day for them. So if you're struggling with the transition away from screen time, I want to encourage you to either, number one, remove something that they can have in their hands. So if they're utilizing screen time on an iPad, a handheld device, or a phone, don't give that to them. Put it on the TV, you take the remote, so then they do not have control over what they're viewing or the length of time they are viewing it for. If this does not work, then I am going to invite you to consider removing screen time from your evening routine. We experimented with this for a solid 4 weeks over our summer break. I started to see that screen time was really negatively affecting my child's behavior, and I one day just had enough and removed all access to all screens, TVs, phones, everything. It was gone for 4 full weeks. We have since started to incorporate it back into our lives, but I have to say, after the first 2 days, I was the happiest I had been in a very long time. My children's behavior increased in positivity, and we really were able to tap into their creativity and their independent ability to play by themselves without the reliance of a screen. Were they a little more involved while I was trying to get dinner on the table? Yes. Was I able to establish new boundaries and rules around that? Also yes. And did they follow through? Absolutely. So if screen time really does seem to be the root of your bedtime problems, there is very real research that supports that. And I want to encourage you to think about the possibility of removing it from 6 p.m. and later, and only allowing it as a privilege, when we come home for daycare, or maybe as something that we do during lunchtime. I hope you can tell that I really love helping families troubleshoot these really nuanced issues with sleep. And one way that I do that is through my one-on-one programs. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find my contact information and ways to get in touch with me and learn more about working one-on-one together. You will also have a plethora of resources here on my channel, and I would love to get some feedback from you about how helpful this content is. So make sure to give it a like and leave a comment with questions, because I am here to help you troubleshoot your individual sleep situation, and I'm just write about it. I'm here and I can answer anything that you have questions about. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you are the first to know when I publish my new sleep content. And as always, from my living room to yours, thank you so much for being with me today, and I'll see you next time.